Welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon FireRed. We are now entering the bicycle road. The road you can only be on your bicycle. What the graphics aren't showing you, however, is that it's a very steep road. So you'll notice this in the gameplay, because when you're trying to stand still, you'll automatically go down. And when you try to go up, you're going very slowly. Just don't ever try to go up the bicycle road, it will take forever. Also, this place is full of biker trainers and their bald brethren cue balls. I just like saying that. These trainers mostly use fighting types and poison types, so perhaps a nice place to level up your psychic Pokemon if you have any. We just took down a Machop, which evolves into Machoke at level 28, and then when you trade it, it evolves into this guy, Machamp. It gets extra arms. Still a fighting type, I've never really used it, to be honest. Not that I dislike the Pokemon, I just never saw the need to use it. Or maybe I'm just saying that because I never had any friends and never had anyone to trade with. But I've used plenty of Gengar, so yeah. I'm just filling up time at this point. Have we seen this move before? Seismic Toss? Also can hit Ghost type Pokemon in Generation 1 even though it's a fighting type move. One of these days I just want to play a Generation 1 Pokemon game and make a team that is based entirely out of Generation 1 glitches and exploits, just for the heck of it. For example, for my starter I would pick Bulbasaur, so as a Venusaur I could do the Toxic and Leech Seed glitch. Or use an Electrode or Jolteon so I can get critical hits everywhere. Stuff like that. Anyway, where are we going on this bicycle road? Well, it goes down to Fuchsia City, where the next gym is, well, technically the next one in the quote-unquote official order. And there's also some other place called the Safari Zone, which we'll be seeing in a minute, and I'll explain it when we get there. It's a place where you can catch Pokemon in a bit of different fashion than usual. Other than that, I'm not sure if there's anything else interesting in Fuchsia City. Well, there's the Move Deleter, the person who can remove moves from your Pokemon, which is mostly used to remove HMs, because you can't remove those at will. Other than HMs, I don't really see a reason to go to the Move Deleter since, again, with the exception of HMs, whenever you want to learn a new move or TM, it will always just replace a different one. Maybe if for whatever competitive reason you want to have less than 4 moves on a Pokemon, I guess maybe relating to Sleep Talk or I don't know. But before we get to Fuchsia City, even though we're technically already there, we're gonna fight some good old bird catchers. That's all I got to say about that. Well, I think this one has a new Pokemon, I think. Let's just wait a few seconds. And Jackie wants to learn a new move. It's Sky Uppercut. It's a decent fighting type move. The only thing really special about it is that it can hit Pokemon when they're using Fly, Bounce or Sky Drop, which are all flying type moves that make a Pokemon semi-invulnerable, but they're usually being used by flying type Pokemon that are resistant to fighting type attacks, so it's not amazingly useful. And speaking of flying types, this is Pharaoh, the evolution of Sparrow. It's a generic bird, so it's a toss-up between this one and Pidgeot. I think when it comes to generic early game bird Pokemon, which yes, they are their own category now, the only one really worth your while is Talonflame from Generation 6. I'm sure I offended someone by saying that, someone who likes Noctowl or Pharaoh or some other generic bird that I don't care about. I won't be too harsh on Pharaoh because he has a Mohawk, he teaches Drill Peck to my Honchkrow. Now Honchkrow dead as a bird Pokemon if you ask me. Let's see what this guy's reason to fight is. Kurukeke, how do you like my bird call? These excuses are getting better and better. To be fair, they don't have a lot to work with. I mean, they have so many different trainers in these games and they can't all just say, I challenge you to a duel, or we are both trainers, therefore we have to fight for some reason. So at the very least they come up with a few lines that are hilariously dumb or bad or stuff like that. Anyway, we're fighting another new flying type Pokemon that doesn't have any wings but can still learn fly. It's the evolution of Doduo, it's Dodrio. It has an angry face, a crazy face and a sad face. And according to its Pokédex entry, its heads are not the only things it has 3 of. Ew. I'm going to assume that is referring to its tail feathers or something. Also, going back to what I said about it not having any wings but still being able to learn fly, I like the idea that it uses its 3 heads and necks as sort of helicopter propellers and spin around. Like a rocket, baby. Anyway, we are now in Fuchsia City, a place that is incredibly annoying to navigate sometimes because of all the one-way ledges. And there are also some trees that require cut down, or just a lot of things being blocked off, so you have to walk around all the time. It's not fun. I think they make it a bit more tolerable in Generation 2 and its remakes, so why didn't they do that for the sake of this remake? Because they have to stick true to the original or some crap like that. Because if there are people out there who get really antsy about nostalgia and things not sticking true to the original, it's gamers and it's not always a good thing, just saying. Oh yeah, Fuchsia City also has this sort of zoo thing going on where you can look at a Pokemon's overworld sprite in a cage. It's kinda pointless. This place on the other hand is not pointless, it's just annoying. Welcome to the Safari Zone. First of all you have to pay to play and then they give you 30 Safari Balls, which I'm not sure how they're mechanically different from normal Pokeballs, but they're the only things you're allowed to use in the Safari Zone. No other types of Pokeballs are allowed in the Safari Zone, and you know what you're also not allowed to use in the Safari Zone? Pokemon. The Safari Zone works a bit differently with catching Pokemon, as I was saying before, and also catching Pokemon is really the only thing you can do here, because you can't grind here for experience, because you can't use any Pokemon. I'll explain how catching Pokemon in the Safari Zone works in a minute, but first, fuck yeah, Seeking! This is a fuck yeah Seeking. It's the evolution of Goldeen, still a water type. I just wanted to show one off really. I also show off how the fishing works. First you select a fishing rod from your bag, or do what I did and make sure to register it to the select button beforehand, like I usually do with the bike. Then you use it near water and wait for a Pokemon to latch on. Once it latches on you have to quickly press the A button before it gets away. So that's how the fishing works. Now I'm gonna talk about how the catching Pokemon in the Safari Zone works, which is such an annoying process. It's even more luck based than the usual catching of Pokemon, because here you can't wither down its health or use any status effects, can't use any more powerful Pokeballs, so all you can do really is cross your fingers and hope it gets in the fucking ball. The 4 options you get here are a bit different, with the exception being Run, which is the same as when you use it in just a wild battle. The other options are Ball, Bait and Rock. I think Ball speaks for itself, you throw the Pokeball and hope it gets in there. However, in the Safari Zone, Pokemon can actually run away from battle, which they usually don't do in wild battles, well, which they never do unless they have a move like Teleport. But here in the Safari Zone, they can just choose to fuck off. That's where Bait and Rock come in, but those two are really just a gamble and there's no real strategy there. What Bait does, it gets the Pokemon less likely to run away, but also less likely to get into the Safari Ball. Rock, on the other hand, makes the Pokemon more likely to get into the Safari Ball, but also more likely to run away. So you get to choose between using a thing with a downside and an upside, or using something with an upside and a downside, so they're both really neutral. Or you can use neither and just throw Safari Balls, which doesn't have any upsides or downsides, so it's also just as neutral. It's a very annoying and just luck-based process, made even more annoying by the fact that there are a lot of Pokemon in the Safari Zone that can only be caught in the Safari Zone and nowhere else. Some with a really low percentage of encountering, so you might have to spend hours here. And if all that wasn't bad enough, you don't get to spend infinite amount of time in the Safari Zone. You only get a certain amount of steps, so once you run out of those steps, you're kicked out of the Safari Zone and have to pay again to get in. Luckily there is a trick you can use to basically spend infinite amount of time in the Safari Zone, and that is by turning. Turning without actually taking a step will also trigger a random battle, but won't decrease the steps you have left in the Safari Zone. So if you just keep turning without taking any steps and triggering battles like that, you can potentially stay in the Safari Zone as long as you want. In the end, the Safari Zone is most annoying when you're going for specific Pokemon or Pokédex completion, because let's just say you're looking for a Pokemon that can only be found in the Safari Zone at like a 5% chance of encountering. So you constantly have to spend time in the Safari Zone looking for that small chance you run into that Pokemon. When you do finally find that Pokemon, it can just run away. And that's why the Safari Zone sucks. And again, you don't have to go here. Well, you do have to go here, but you don't have to catch Pokemon here. What you do have to do in the Safari Zone in order to progress with the game is go to the area I'm in right now at the end of the Safari Zone, and 1, get the golden teeth to get the Strength HM somewhere else, and 2, go into the secret house where someone will give you the HM04 Surf. So once again, if you're just going through the game without using any Pokemon that are found in the Safari Zone, you do have to go there once without having to fight any Pokemon. Just go to that area and get those 2 things. The HM04 Surf we get right away, even though right now we can't use it yet until we beat the gym that is here. The other HM, like I just told you, is by getting the golden teeth in the Safari Zone and then go to the house I'm in right now and talk to this old fella who lost his teeth. Then you give it to him and he will give you the HM04 Strength, which allows you to push boulders. Strength we can now use right away because we already beat Erica. If you didn't beat Erica before coming here, then you have to beat Erica before you can use Strength outside of battle. Luckily I already beat Erica, so I can push the tutorial boulder that is right here in his office for some reason. After I teach both Strength and Surf to one of my Pokemon, of course. As far as HMs go, they are actually pretty good moves to use during battles. Surf especially I like using a lot because it's one of the most reliable water type moves. There are more powerful water type moves, but those usually have a lot lower accuracy. Strength is pretty much the same in how both powerful yet accurate it is, but it's a normal type move which personally I don't usually bother with. But it's not a bad move by any means. Both Surf and Strength don't have any side effects, nor good or bad. But there's one annoying thing about Generation 1 and HMs that I didn't mention before, and that is, in this game, if you want to use Strength on a boulder, for example, you just stand next to the boulder and press A, like I'm about to do right here. Select it, say yes, and now you can just push all the boulders in this room and keep pushing them until you leave the room or go to a different one. In Generation 1, however, for every time you wanted to push a boulder or cut down a tree, you would have to press start, go to your Pokemon, go to the Pokemon that has the HM, and then select the HM to push the boulder once or cut one tree down, and you would have to do that every single time. So that's another thing that they thankfully changed in later generations. But enough about HMs, because as you saw I did catch one Pokemon in the Safari Zone, and that is Dratini. Dratini is our first and only Dragon type Pokemon in Generation 1. Well, Dratini and its 2 evolutions. Then in Generation 2 they only added one more Dragon type Pokemon. It really took a while for Dragon types to start becoming common. But now that we do have a Dragon type at our party, I can finally read out the type matchups of Dragon type Pokemon. So here goes. Dragon types are weak to Dragon type moves, Ice type moves, and in Generation 6 they start becoming weak to Fairy type moves. Dragon types are resistant against Fire, Water, Grass and Electric, so really the 4 kind of basic elements. Well, basic RPG elements at the very least. When it comes to Dragon type attacks, the things that are weak to it, or the only things that are weak to it, are other Dragon types. The only things resistant to it are Steel, and Fairy types are completely immune against Dragon type attacks. So Dragon type attacks don't sound very useful because the only thing that are weak to it are other dragons. However, a lot of Dragon type attacks do tend to be really powerful, even more so when used by a Dragon type. But when it comes to type matchups, having a Dragon type attack on your party isn't really a necessity because there's only one thing that's weak to it, and those are also weak to Ice type attacks. On the plus side, there are only 1/2 things that are resistant/immune to it, so at the very least Dragon type attacks are more useful than normal type attacks. Anyway, enough about dragons, because we are now in the Fuchsia City Gym, which is a poison type gym. I don't show off any of the trainers here, but there is something I want to bring up about them, and that is that very few of them actually use poison type Pokemon. Most of them use Drowsies and Hypnos, which are psychic types, and I don't know why, because there are plenty of poison types in this game. I actually made sure to look it up. There are 14 Pokemon in this gym's total, not counting the gym leader. Wanna know how many of those in this poison type gym are actually poison type? 3 of them. And they're all Arbok. So less than a quarter is actually a poison type. The rest is 5 Drowsies, 2 Hypnos, 2 Kadabras, and even 2 Sandslash, which are ground types. And both Psychic and ground types are actually strong against poison, so I don't know what this is about. Oh, and when we do actually get to the actual Psychic type gym, they use a few ghost types. But that aside, we are now fighting Koga. He is a ninja, leader of the poison type gym. Actually uses poison types. I hate this muck we're fighting right here, by the way. More so in Heart Gold and Soul Silver than anywhere else, but it tends to use Minimize a lot, which increases his evasion, so he can be hard to hit sometimes. And I don't like that. You're just supposed to stand there and let me punch you in the face, which shouldn't be hard because you're about 40% face. Made slightly harder by the fact that Dugtrio doesn't have any hands to punch with, but that aside, he's dead now. Actually, I don't think that's his toughest Pokemon, but that's the one I usually have the most trouble with because I can't hit a moving target. He also has 2 coughing on his party, which aren't terribly difficult to deal with. Maybe I should talk about his gym a little, because the gym looks like an empty room, but there are actually invisible walls all over the place. You can actually see them very slightly by looking at the floor. It's easier in Generation 1, but you can still sort of do it here. But I usually don't bother and just walk forward until I walk into something. Then I turn around in some other direction until I run into a wall there, and eventually I get the Koga. Now this is his final Pokemon, which is a Weezing. Unlike his 2 Coffin, it doesn't use Self-Destruct, which would be hilarious if he did. Oh, and this is Toxic, the special kind of poison move. If I remember correctly, we do actually get the TM for Toxic after this fight from Koga. I actually give it to Venenum later on, but end up not using it a whole lot, because usually I'm strong enough to where I don't really need Toxic to sort of wait it out until the Pokemon dies on its own eventually. But for dealing with the poison type gym, well, specifically the poison type gym leader that actually uses poison types, but I'm going on for too long about this now. Psychics are your friend, mostly psychic type attacks, not really ground type attacks because he uses 2 coughing and a wheezing, which have the ability levitate, so they're immune to ground type attacks. But in Generation 1, ground type attacks are your friend because levitate didn't exist. For this playthrough, I don't actually have a psychic type attack on my party right now, so this battle might take a minute or 2, or 9, or 12, or 14. Well, that and the fact that his Pokemon is about 9 levels above me. At some point I started being a bit under-leveled in this playthrough, which I suppose does add a bit of challenge, but personally I like being around the same level as my opponent. I don't like being over-leveled either. When you're over-leveled when fighting a gym leader, or any sort of trainer really, it comes to the point where it doesn't really matter what type of move you use, as long as it's a strong one and will always do enough damage where you can just take down your opponent and you don't really have to think. Some others like being overpowered for gym battles and such. Personally, I just don't really agree with that. I see myself as more of a middle ground. I don't really like doing challenge runs either. Then again, I see myself as a middle of the road guy for a lot of different things. But back to the gym fight. Koga has 4 Pokemon, which in terms of levels I think they're fine for this point in the game. But I do wish that at some point gym leaders start having a bit more Pokemon. And they do eventually, but I don't know, I think it could happen a bit sooner because I like fighting a number of different Pokemon in one battle. Though I think the worst offender of it all is Pokemon X and Y, where the Elite Four all have 4 Pokemon and they're not even that high leveled, so that was just sort of disappointing and easy and yeah. Oh, but that reminds me, there was one other thing I wanted to bring up about Pokemon The Origin, and that is that it actually explains the gym difficulty, as it were. In the games it's never really explained, you just sort of assume that you just happen to run into the easiest gym first and into the hardest gym last. Pokemon The Origin actually has a really good reason for it. They check on how many badges you have at that moment and then alter what team they use to be on your level. So I like that, it's one of those small little touches that Pokemon The Origin has. So that's good. Now we are reaching the end of part 15 of the Pokemon playthrough, which means we're about halfway done. This playthrough has 29 parts in total, and thus far it has already taken me like 6 or 7 months, which is way too long. So people, I'm gonna take a small break from the Pokemon playthrough because it's taking so long and I just want to do other games, so I've decided to do a few other games in between, so I'm not constantly working on just the Pokemon playthrough, and in the end it will have taken me like a year or so. So, like I said, the Pokemon playthrough is gonna go on another hiatus just because I want to do other things and other games, and it's taking me too long. So part 16 is not gonna get uploaded for a very long time. But when we do get to part 16, we're gonna get our final game team together, so look forward to that. Sometime, probably 2015, mostly because it's already December, so of course it's gotta be 2015. Maybe even 16, but I think that's going a bit too far. Then again, I don't really have as much free time to record videos as I used to anymore. I have school, which takes up a lot of my time. I have a day job now, which I didn't have before. But above all, I'm just kinda lazy, and I like playing video games just slightly more than I like talking about video games. Again, I will be working on other playthroughs, but in terms of Pokemon it's gonna be a while until I get back to this. So I leave you with this incredibly boring screen of me teaching an HM of Fly to my fly slave, which I called Cinnabar, misspelled, and now we're gonna fly this Cinnabar. Well, we will, in 2015. See you then.